When you think of a constitution, what pops into your head? Probably some dusty old book, right? Something locked away in a museum. But what if I told you that for the world's largest democracy, it's anything but a relic? So let's really get into this. This question, it isn't just some academic exercise. We're talking about a country with over 1 billion people. And for them, the Indian Constitution is so much more than a historical document. It's a living, breathing text that is literally at the center of the country's biggest, most intense debates right now. And that right there is the key. You see, from the halls of Parliament all the way to the Supreme Court, this 75-year-old document has become the battleground for arguments that are going to shape India's future. To really show you what I mean, we're going to look at 4 recent, super high-stakes examples. Okay, so our first story kicks off with something that sounds almost ridiculously simple, an empty chair in Parliament. But trust me, this isn't about furniture. It's a real puzzle about procedure, about power, and about the nuts and bolts of how democracy is supposed to work. Okay, so let's talk about the Deputy Speaker of the Lok Sabha. That's India's lower house of parliament. Think of this role as like the legislature's co-pilot. It's that important. Article 93 of the Constitution is super clear. It says the post must be filled as soon as may be. It's not a suggestion, it's a mandate. This person is vital for keeping things running, and by a really long-standing tradition, the job is given to someone from the opposition, to keep things balanced. So, here's the puzzle. That co-pilot seat, it's been empty since 2019. I mean, for years, one of the most critical legislative roles in the whole country has just gone unfilled. And that, as you can imagine, is raising some pretty serious questions about whether the government is even following its own rulebook. So you might be asking, why does one empty chair matter so much? Well, it's because it's not just a chair. It's a symbol. It points to a potential breakdown in the actual machinery of democracy. It's a break from a tradition that was specifically designed to keep power in check. So the debate really becomes, are both the letter and the spirit of the Constitution being followed here? All right, let's shift gears. Our next story touches on something deeply personal for millions of people: language and identity. I mean, India's linguistic diversity is just incredible, and the Constitution has the massive job of managing all of it. And believe me, that's a conversation that never, ever stops. This brings us to something called the Constitution's 8th Schedule. Now, this is basically the official VIP list of recognized languages in India. And let me tell you, for a language community, getting on this list is a huge deal. It means official recognition, government support, prestige, the whole shebang. But the big question is this list set in stone? Oh, not at all. And this is a perfect example of what we mean by a living constitution. This list has actually grown over the decades, adapting to reflect all of India's diverse voices. You had Sindhi added back in '67, then Konkani, Manipuri, and Nepali in '92, and 4 more in 2003. It's constantly evolving, which of course leads to the big question people are asking today. So how do you get a new language on the list? Well, this is where things get really interesting and pretty heated. See, over the years, committees have suggested some clear criteria. Things like you need to have millions of speakers or a rich literary history. But the official government line from the Ministry of Home Affairs is that there are no fixed standards. And that ambiguity, that lack of a clear answer, is right at the heart of the current demands to include languages like Bhojpuri and Kokaborak. Okay, now we're going to ramp things up a bit because our next story is a full-blown, high-stakes power struggle. This is a battle over a fundamental question in India's federal system. Where does the power really lie? Is it with the governments that people elect in their states, or with the governors who are appointed by the central government? On paper, the process seems pretty straightforward. A state legislature passes a bill. It goes to the governor for a signature. And under Article 200, the governor has a few clear options. They can sign it into law, they can withhold their signature, or they can send the bill to the president for consideration. Simple, right? But what happens when a governor decides to use a 4th option? One that's not even mentioned in the Constitution, just doing nothing at all. Well, the Supreme Court had something pretty powerful to say about that. They basically got right to the point. When they were faced with these massive delays, especially in a major case involving the Tamil Nadu governor, the judiciary had to step in. And the court's finding was crystal clear. Prolonged inaction by governors is illegal. They basically said you can't use delay as a kind of secret pocket veto. That's just not a constitutional option. And look, this is way more than just some dry legal debate. This is a fundamental fight about federalism itself. The question is this: can one official who is appointed, not elected, effectively block the will of millions of people who voted for their state government? That question strikes right at the very heart of the balance of power that the Constitution was so carefully designed to protect. And for our final story, we're getting into what is maybe the most fundamental debate of all. It's a debate about a single word in the Constitution's preamble that tries to define the very soul of the nation. And that word is secularism. Just one word, but it has been at the center of incredibly intense political and judicial debates for decades now. And its journey into the Constitution, well, it's not nearly as straightforward as you might think. Yeah, the timeline on this is absolutely fascinating. Get this. Back in 1973, in the famous Kesavananda case, the Supreme Court declared that secularism was part of the Constitution's basic structure. Now, that means it's a core principle so fundamental that it can never be removed. And this was before the word secular was even officially added to the preamble, which happened in 1976. And even today, the court keeps reaffirming that this principle was always at the very heart of the Constitution, whether the word was explicitly written there or not. So, okay. We've looked at procedure, we've talked about identity, we've dived into a power struggle. Where does this all leave us? Well, it shows that all these different threads, they all weave together into one single, massive, ongoing story. Think about it. An empty chair in Parliament, an ever-growing list of official languages, a governor's calculated delay, a single, powerful, defining word. These aren't just random, isolated issues. They're all chapters in the living story of India's constitution. They show us how this 75-year-old text is being actively interpreted, debated, and even fought over every single day. And really, that's the biggest takeaway here. This document is not some static relic from the past. It's a dynamic, living script for the world's largest democracy. The debates we've just talked about, they're just the latest lines being written into that script. So the final question really isn't for me to answer. It's for you to think about. What do you think the next chapter will be?